Okay, well, I think it's time for us to officially get going. So, welcome everybody. I am delighted that you have joined us for today's webinar in the series Everyday Gen AI Research, Writing, and Design Tools for Transportation Professionals. So, this is a series, and today is the second webinar in our series, and we're going to be focusing on how to use generative AI tools to improve your writing. My name is Dr. Asha Weinstein Agrawal, and I work at the Mineta Transportation Institute at San Jose State University, your host for the webinar. I'm MTI's Education Director, as well as Director of MTI's National Transportation Finance Center. The Mineta Transportation Institute's mission is to increase mobility for all by improving safety, efficiency, accessibility, and convenience of our nation's transportation system. We accomplish this through surface transportation research, technology transfer, education, and workforce development. Among the many workforce development programs that MTI supports is an online graduate program in transportation management designed for working professionals in the industry. I'm the director of that program, so please reach out if you'd like to learn more, and I believe in the chat there will be a link. Now, for today's webinar, we are going to be exploring how free, easy to access Gen AI tools like ChatGPT, Gemini, or Claude can support real writing tasks, including brainstorming, organizing, drafting, and then refining your language and content. Just two quick housekeeping notes about the event today. First, we are recording the webinar, and the link to view will be available soon on MTI's website and social media pages. Second, we will have a little time for discussion after our presenters speak, so feel free to add questions to the webinar's Q&A feature. It is easier if you can use the Q&A rather than the chat for the questions, so we don't lose track of it. Now, I am delighted to introduce the two experts who are joining us today. Ramses Madou is the Division Manager of Planning, Policy, and Sustainability for the Department of Transportation in the City of San Jose. He is leading the city's efforts to find new and innovative transit technologies, delivery methods, and business plans. Before joining the City of San Jose, Ramses served as the Associate Director of Parking and Transportation Services at Stanford University for 10 years. He is an alum of San Jose State, where he earned the Master of Urban Planning degree. Our second speaker today is Lisa V. Rose, who has served as the Mineta Transportation Institute's Communications Specialist since 2020. Her background includes more than 15 years in communication, storytelling, and inclusive education. She has a master's in English and comparative literature from San Jose State, where she has previously taught writing and helped develop the university's online prereq course for incoming first-year students. So we are going to hear first from Lisa and then from Ramses. Welcome to you both. And Lisa, take it away, please.
Hi, everybody. I'm so glad to be here with you and talk about my very favorite thing, which is writing, and get to, I hope to lay some groundwork for Ramsey's more specific discussion and kind of do an overview. Give me a second while I get my screen shared with you. Let's see if we can see my slides here. What, can we see the slides, Ramses? What do you see? Can you see them?
There they go. Yep.
All right, great. Okay, so as Asha said, this is the second webinar in our Gen AI series. So I'm gonna assume that you know a little bit about it, but I would like to give a little bit of overview here, and make sure that we're all operating on the same page before I start getting into how to use it. Make sure that we know what it is and its limitations. So I'm going to briefly go over what is AI, Gen AI, how you're probably already using it, some of the really critical limitations, and then get into the specifics of how you can use it for the writing. And then we go, let's see. And I got about 15 minutes, so we will get through this. Here we go. So what is Gen AI? It's generative AI, which is artificial intelligence that, you guessed it, generates content. It can do text, which is what we're going to be talking about today, images, all kinds of other things. And it creates that content from patterns that it got from being trained on really large data sets. So even if you're not using AI in your writing already, you're probably already using it in lots of other places. And it's increasingly integrated into our lives. And everywhere you look, there is AI. And so, you being here today is a smart move because it's here and we got to figure out how we're going to use it and how we can use it effectively. So one thing before we get into how we use it, like I said, I want to go over just some of the just brief limitations. I don't know about the rest of you, but when I think of AI, when this first started becoming ubiquitous everywhere, I imagined when I was younger, when I was a kid, like AI would be like the Terminator or, HAL 9000 and you're like, oh, robots. And it's easy in the way that it's presented today in the marketing and when you interact with it to think of it that way. And forget that it's not really intelligent in the way that, maybe the Terminator was. It's not really a robot. It is an LLM. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about these, at least the text-based Gen AI ones, which is a large language model. And it's not thinking, it's predicting. And it's just something that we have to keep in mind because, again, it's really easy to forget that when it seems so intelligent. And it's kind of like those, when you're texting and you get it's suggesting the next word. And sometimes it's really useful. Or when you're writing an email, same thing. And sometimes you're thinking, that's not what I was talking about at all, right? So just something to keep in mind that this is not intelligence in true artificial intelligence, even though we say it is. It's predictive. So in that case, because of that, we have to know that AI is not always right. Please don't treat it as infallible. And in fact, there are some serious limitations that you want to always keep in mind when you are using it. And these include, where did it get the information, right? What was this trained on? And it's trained on human information. And as we know, humans make mistakes. And so that can mean that there's infactual information, that there are biases, it could be, there's also the issue of plagiarism. A lot of the early LLMs were trained without permission on, large amounts of text from the internet, including, major publications, and that was a whole issue. And so, that it's always evolving because it's a new thing, but these are also things to keep in mind as you are using it and understanding how that's changing the policy within your organization and, as well as just what this is and the limitations that it has. And I don't want to spend too much time on that. So we'll move on, but just one last one to kind of stick in your head. So by now, probably everyone has heard of hallucinations that AI does. But here's an example. And I want to show this example because this is obviously he's a lawyer. He's probably a very intelligent person, educated person. And he inadvertently made a huge mistake because he didn't learn what you're learning right now, which is, what the limitations are and what the uses are. And so this lawyer, Stephen Schwartz, he was developing a case and he used ChatGPT. He asked him for, ChatGPT, can you give me some examples of some previous cases that I can use in my argument? And ChatGPT said, yes, of course, here you go. The problem was it made them up, right? And that's a hallucination. And it's pretty common because these LLMs want to give you the answer. They're trained to give you a response. And so they will give you a response even if they have to make it up. So just remember that it is not really a robot. It's more like an intern, and always check the work that you do. So now the part that you probably want to talk about, which is how can we use it? So we can use it in all steps of the writing process. You probably do all these. You may not consciously think of all the steps of the writing process like you did in, high school or college, but you're still doing them. You're generating the idea. What is this? What am I trying to do? Who is the audience? How long does it need to be? Those kinds of brainstorming, basic things. Organizing the thoughts. Okay, now I have all these ideas. Where do they go? Writing itself, putting the words on the page and then editing and revising, maybe change that word here, rearrange those kinds of things. And you can use AI for all of those. So I'm going to show you some ways to do that. So brainstorming, I think that this is probably one of my favorite ways to use this. I work remote alone and I don't have coworkers that I can just walk over to their desk and say, hey, what do you think of this idea? And so sometimes you do need a sounding board like that. And these Gen AI apps can absolutely do that. If you say, hey, this is what I'm working on, what am I missing from this approach? If you're writing a specific piece about transit fare and you're saying, hey, here's what I think about transit fare. And it said, oh, well, you didn't even think about that. It could be free or, maybe from a different perspective from a different country. Or, hey, did you know that California does it this way? And it can kind of help you with that. Again, it's not the end point, but as a starting point, it can be really great. You can explore different perspectives. You can say, what would this person kind of imagine? You can tell, just like you would tell your coworker, hey, imagine that you're XYZ stakeholder, and then what would you respond to this? You can kind of ask it to role play different scenarios, and so that you can kind of just get that flowing, especially if you get stuck or you just kind of need to launch off of something. So I try to come up with just some random examples so you could see what an actual prompt would be. The best way to get what you want is to be as specific as possible. So if you say, write an email, and this is true of any kind of writing, but you can say, write an email. Okay, but who is it for? How long is it? What tone do you need it to be? All those kinds of things. So in all of the prompt engineering that you're doing, make sure you're being as specific as possible. That will get you what you want. But you can also do iterative prompt engineering. So you type, write me an email to my boss about I need PTO. But then maybe, the email came out really generic and you forgot, oh, actually, I want to make it more personal because whatever. You can add something back in. Maybe you wanted to add in a space for a detail like a date or anything like that. Or again, just more broadly about different perspectives in there. So that's a really good use of it as kind of a sounding board. You can also use it for organizing. This is also a really good time saver. It makes it very efficient if you have some notes and you want to make it into an outline. One of the things that I have used it for is, let's say you're working on a new project and you just kind of word vomit all over the page. You just type everything and don't bother about punctuation. You don't bother about the order, anything like that. And then you can kind of hand that to the AI and say, okay, make this in a logical order, or, what themes are arising that I wrote from these notes, and then, put it in 5 bullet points, or what kind of argument could I make from this? And so it helps you synthesize the information. So that is a useful tool for that. Prioritizing. So organizing, here's some two just examples that I tried to come up with. You can say, hey, organize these notes, like I said, and then paste your notes in there and try to ask what you're looking for specifically. You can say in here, I said, emphasize the problem and approach, put them in alphabetical order, whatever you're looking for, and you can kind of ask for that specifically, and hopefully that it will help you streamline to what you were actually trying to get. So writing, personally, I think that the actual content generation, writing words on the page, is not the best use of the Gen AI. If you were going to do any of these parts of the writing process, it's all part of the writing process. But this particular one of, just write this thing for me, under certain circumstances, that can be really useful, especially if it's a redundant or a repetitive task, or you're looking for a part of something, but if you're writing 5 pages and you want it to write a paragraph of a transition for you, sure, yeah. But don't ask it to write the whole thing because it will come out really generic because it's just a pattern. It's not going to have, your specific voice. However, like I said, using it for transitions, using it to change the tone or approach, if you have a really technical abstract or something and you say, I really want to write this for plain language so that I can help, my colleagues understand it. Or if you want to generate a summary of the larger piece of writing that you have. And I also sometimes use it as a glorified thesaurus where I will ask it, can you write this sentence a few different ways. I don't take the sentence that it gave me, but what I might do is take pieces of it and then put it back together. And if I say, oh, that's a really great verb that it used there, or the syntax, the order of the sentence might be really useful. And it also just kind of like, again, a sounding board or your colleague and bounce ideas back and forth, and you can kind of lead yourself to where you need to be with the support of this tool. So now we've done brainstorming, organizing, and the writing itself. Revising. So everybody, I'm sure, already uses spell check, right? Everybody. So you're already using it. There are more involved ones, Grammarly and Pro Writing Aid. They can be really useful for grammar. They're not, again, 100% infallible. They definitely make mistakes, but they're really, really useful for pointing out the errors, and they can help with clarity. They can help, if you tend to be verbose and you're just kind of rambling a little bit and you say, tighten this up, it can cut some of that content and make it a bit clearer and more refined, and also can help you if you are being redundant and point out these kind of things that, your robot intern is kind of how I like to think of it, would do for you. If you say, hey, check this out. Is there anything redundant in here? Okay. So that's the other use for revising. Here, this is not a 100% real example, but it is based on something that I was actually writing for MTI. And this is a blurb for a new webinar. So I imagined, this is not the actual draft, but let's say I wrote this draft. It accomplishes what it needs to do. It says, hey, come to this webinar. This is what's going to happen. But it's kind of boring. Attend a discussion with the authors. The session will cover examples. So then I told the AI, say, can you make this more exciting? Can you make this more interesting? Also, I forgot to put the date in. Where is a good place that I could put that? Could I do this without AI? Yeah. But if you have a short amount of time, or you just want to see a way to do it and you can kind of tweak it from there, throw it in there. It gave me a lot longer one, and I wouldn't take this face value and just, submit it, but you could take it and kind of massage it a little bit to get what you wanted. Join us on date is way more interesting than attend a discussion, right? It's a call to action. It includes more details in there. The only other thing I want to point out, which is why you should not take it at face value, is if you see the underline phrases in here, those are indicative to me that this was written by AI, because AI relies almost exclusively on the rule of three. People like rule of threes, but AI likes to always group things in rule of threes. And again, it's not the end of the world if you have this generic kind of writing sometimes, but don't rely on this for everything. Use it as a kickstart, use it as your assistant, use it as your colleague or your intern, and then take this, refine it a little bit. It saves you time. Super useful in a lot of different situations. So that's all the overall steps. I wanted to, this was just something funny in here. This is a real screenshot from a project that I was editing. Sometimes this is a paid one. This is Pro Writing Aid that I use. I still use it. It's still really useful. It's not always correct, as you can see from the example on here. One last thing that I want to go over really quick is, I think Ramses is going to talk about this a little bit more, but you can do custom voices with your AI. I don't know if you've ever heard of Gemini Gems. That's what that is. You can teach it to write a specific way that adheres to your specific voice or your organizational policies by feeding it more of that information, and you can keep it so that it's, always writes specific type of thing in a specific style for you. And that's a really other great use of that, depending on what you need it for. So takeaway here, what AI does well: it helps you brainstorm, it can help you organize, it can catch some grammar errors, and it can be your assistant when you're drafting and revising. AI does not do original analysis. It does pattern prediction. It cannot add your personal insight or your authentic voice. And the big one is just do the critical thinking. Always check where it came from, the sources, and make sure that it is up to your standards before you actually use it. If you don't want to use AI, you can do all of these other things. Read your work out loud for revising, write it, leave for a while, come back, edit it. And the final note that I would like to leave you with is that AI is a tool, not a replacement for you. AI is not going to take your job, but someone who knows how to use AI probably is. So Thank you for that. Here's a couple resources for you. These are some Gen AI you can use for writing and editing. These are just some useful tools in there. I put a tiny URL, but I think we saved the slides as well so that you can check those out either. And feel free to contact me with any other questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Lisa, for running through all those tools and tips. And now we're going to turn it over for Ramses to give us sort of examples of how he applies all these general principles in his day-to-day work as a transportation manager.
Thank you, Asha and Lisa, for that great introduction. And yeah, I'm going to kind of go through within the environment here in the city of San Jose. So I'm the division manager of planning policy and sustainability
Ramses,
here.
I'm so sorry. It's a little hard to hear you.
Is that better?
Much better, thanks.
Okay. All right. I will just hold my mic close to my mouth here. Yeah, so I manage a team of about 20 folks. We produce a lot of writing. I do a lot of writing myself. And we're kind of constantly in the scrum, right? We're constantly trying to have to keep up with deadlines and trying to figure out how to be more efficient. So we're working on how to bring these tools into our environment in a responsible and a useful way. And I think we're kind of cutting the weeds right now, and it's starting to get somewhere. So I'm going to share some of the insights that we've gained here. So first, I'm going to start with I'd say your institution or organization that you're working for. I would think a lot of the institutions here in California have some guidelines and policies around how to use these tools already. I would hope, at least. And this is really right because I think that certain organizations are I would say in a wait and see or don't use approach. Other organizations are gung ho and saying figure out how to do this. We've had at a very top level policy perspective, our administrative leaders as well as our political leaders have specifically said, go figure out how to be more efficient by using tools. And that has been a kind of call to action for all of us. We have lots of internal training. We have lots of tools being brought to us and money being spent to bring in these. And so you'll get these slides later, but I will say we have AI policy here in San Jose. Here's the website it's on. The link will be in the slides that you'll get later if you want to look at them, or you can just type in San Jose AI policy. And here we have basically two important layers of policy being expressed. One is that outward policy. What is it that the city promises its constituents about AI? How will it be used? Where is it okay to be using it? And how are we going to be transparent about its use, right? So that's that kind of top-level city policy there. But we've also gotten a lot of internal AI use guidelines, right? And this is kind of what's giving us within the staff the guidelines as to how we're supposed to use this. In particular, it tells us about when we need to or don't need to cite its use, and what kinds of uses are kind of the things that really need to be looked at versus other things where it's okay to kind of do the initial brainstorming and we don't need to talk about that too much. So you can see here, it's giving you here some low risk to high risk kinds of pieces. You can see here medium risk, and this is a lot of what I'm going to be talking about is memo and policy document creation. Is look, this is considered medium risk, which means needs careful review and is public facing, right? And so that careful review is a note I'll be hitting over and over again here. And you know, as Lisa was kind of gesturing at, look, AI is a wonderful tool to help expedite our work. It is not a replacement, and I haven't seen things that can do that just yet. Okay, so let's get into it a little bit. How are we actually using this? So in actual generation, again, I'm going to hit that point. It is not the end product. It is just a start. I'm very dyslexic. Writing is quite a hard thing for me. And at the same time, it's something I have to do constantly. And so being able to get that first kind of the seeds, that initial research, all of that kind of stuff really, really is helpful. getting those first versions of paragraphs or even versions of much of what is going to be written through generation has been working really well for me. But nothing I have ever put out has not gone through many, many human layers of review, most notably by myself before anybody else sees because some of those things Lisa was saying about kind of the very generic speak that it puts out, and importantly, the hallucinations. There is always some kind of odd reference to a non-existent idea or a policy that doesn't actually exist. And so you really have to be on top of what that all is. Um, but yeah, so I'm using this for research a lot. I'm going to show you an example of a use I've done mostly for seeding, actually, and all that. One thing I did really want to talk about is prompts. Is see, making sure that as you are developing what you want the AI to do, really think in specifics. We've brought it up already, right? Is really think about the specifics you want it. Who are you talking to? What are the main points you want to say? You could give it lots of information about overall structure, and I'll show you in my examples. You can give it a lot of reference material, and it really helps guide where that work is. So looking here at my example, I was working on a multi-jurisdictional grant here, and I was able to use ChatGPT to give me an early draft. Now, this went through an extensive amount of revision afterwards. But what I was able to do here is say, fill out all the grant application questions for this Stevens Creek grant, and I used the study that's behind it. There's an overall draft scope, and I wrote this completely by hand first, right? As what's our actual draft scope, and that feeds into then how to make the grant application. Then I gave it a bunch of. This is actually a study that was the precursor study to what we were trying to do. And then some examples of the kinds of work by one of our colleagues sitting here of what the kind of thing we wanted to see in that was, in particular around public outreach. And then, of course, the grant piece itself. So I'm adding all of these different documents into my prompt. Then I'm giving it this prompt. Now, I'm not going to bore you with the long chain here, but basically what I did here is at first, it just gives me this kind of high level overview of what it is. Then I slowly kind of give it more and more massaging to get it to give me more information and more understanding of what we might here. And eventually I'm getting down to it saying, all right, really give me what the text is that I'm going to start putting out there and all that. And so that turned into, here we go. And so that actually eventually turned out into text that I brought out into the actual, this is our template grant application, which then again, as I want to keep repeating, this is only the start from there. Then you really start editing and all the multi-jurisdiction partners really got in here and spent a lot of time making sure the words were correct and lined up and all of that kind of stuff. So there's an example of kind of generation and how we're using it to get directly from instigation or motivation and product. Then I want to move on to curation. Now, curation or brainstorming might be another way to really talk about this. But one thing that we're hearing a lot about is these hallucinations and these the issues with how AI is handling our information and how broad its access is. So one thing that I have found incredibly useful is to go in and use a smaller environment. So this is Google's Notebook LM. The Gemini Gems is another potential version of this. So this one is really kind of a research curation tool here. And what you do with this is you bring in, and so you see here this list on the left side, all of the different resources that you want your AI to be focused on. And here what I have is all of the city of San Jose's transportation plans that are adopted, plus the immediately related plans like the general plan, things like that. And then what that does is now when I ask it questions, it's highly specific in what it's referencing. So it's not going out on the larger internet and getting all kinds of other information and patterns to give me a response. Instead, it's going straight to these documents. And so I say here, what are San Jose's mode change goals? And over what time periods are those goals set? And what it's going to do now is return that information. And one of my very favorite things is here. It gives me the actual references, which documents and where within those documents those things are. So this becomes, as Lisa said, that research engine. Again, never trust anything that comes out of this, but also, learn its faults, learn how it goes along, and it could prove incredibly useful. This has been really useful in a lot of different ways for brainstorming. I've started creating a bucket for a major project or work area on my team to kind of get into that. Kind of see here, I'm really involved in the Diridon Station redesign. We're doing a personal delivery device pilot. You can kind of see all these different things that are going on, and I start putting in the different documents that are helping me do that. So this is giving me that brainstorming. This is giving me some of that fact checking and things like that. These kinds of tools can really be helpful for. Then another piece is institutionalization style. As Lisa noted, there can be quite a useful implementation of AI through revision. And so what we're doing in San Jose through our city manager's office, who's the final check, as many of you guys know, before you get those memos out to your council or board, that final administrative layer is playing its and having a consistent style and a way of checking your documents is incredibly important. And so what our city manager's office is working on right now is a style guide that's built into a it's built into an instance of ChatGPT. So here's a version of this. So this is, we get this little link over here, City Manager's Office Agenda Services memo checker right here. And we bring in and you drop your memo in. This was not, there's a more advanced prompt now that they want us to use, but this is what I was using then. And it gives us this really great readout. What I really like about these readouts is one, it goes through, and what they've done beforehand is feed this version of ChatGPT all the styles, right, that are important to them. So they have, you can see, I'll just scroll a little bit so you can kind of see. So they have format, layout, subject line issues, required sections and ordering, so on and so forth. And it's quite an extensive list. You can see here we're going all the way to I don't even know, N, final clean version requirement. And so they've put all of this in and then said, please check these documents for that. And as those of you who have written many memos know, you never get through that final check without getting a whole bunch of little stylistic elements that you have to go back for. And so we've been using this now in my group for the last 2 to 3 months, and I'll say the amount of back and forth at the end with our memos has dropped drastically, just because a lot of those little things that are required in our memos and official writing are being taken care of. And so much of these things are those little spacers. So here, I'll show you the document that came out of this one. Here it is. And so, this is this very, very standard memo template. This one's on our micromobility fee adjustment. And, we have all these things, right? The exact spacing you need between segments and headers, when you can use acronyms or not, all of these kinds of rules, right? And the ability to run your memo through and get all of those things checked off and adjust them before you even submit it has really made this work, or is improving our efficiency and honestly reducing that kind of anxiety that everybody feels around it. The other thing I really like about this implementation is it's also a teaching tool, right? So much of what we hear about AI is, oh, everybody's, kind of giving up on having to think or do work. But if you look at this correctly, and this is my advice to the city manager's office, is keep this up, right? And we're reformatting this output a little bit, so it's a little easier to tell where you've made where you have actions you actually need to take, like here, remove all duplicate header pages. Okay, um, but this also is helping staff see. All right, these are the things that folks care about up there. Let's make sure we're starting to learn these things as we move forward. And that's the end of my presentation. So very excited to go for any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, Ramses. So we're going to open it up now for questions from everybody. Please use the Q&A feature if you'd like to put some into the discussion. And let's see, we have a first question that's come in. This might be more for you, Ramses, but Lisa, please, add as well. How are you handling version management and synchronization among the AI workspace and whatever document management system you use?
Yeah, I think it's an incredibly good question, and I mean, to some degree, it matters what your actual version control management is. Right now, I'll say there's two different things going on. One, the way that we manage memos generally is whoever the primary author is, it's their responsibility to manage the document. And we don't necessarily have a ironclad, this is how you manage a document within a lot of the departments. Unless you're in the legal department, they have an incredibly intense version of what that means. But what I'll say is this: and I think it's also kind of goes down to, again, making sure that humans are always the last people to fact check and edit pieces. You're taking usually content, putting it into an AI process of some sort, and then taking it back out. And that back out, at least for me, is usually a copy and paste straight out of ChatGPT or whatever system I'm looking at. And so I'm managing it in that way. Then the other thing is, at the moment, at least, all of our AI tools are before our big submissions, right? So the version control really gets intense when you start moving through different department or different layers of the institution. So when you're actually submitting to the director's office or into the city manager's processes. And as long as you're doing a lot of that copy paste and management beforehand, it hasn't been an issue so far for us. I know that's not a kind of precise answer, but that's kind of how it works for us.
Okay, well, I have a question for both of you. And Lisa, maybe you can start with the more generic answer, and then Ramses, you could follow up with how a city or an agency might take this. So, plagiarism. I've used, I haven't told AI to write my whole memo, but I got them to write some paragraphs and brainstorm. To what extent do I need to worry that I have plagiarized in some literal sense from other documents? Do I just not worry about it at all? Or what are the steps I could or should take to make sure that I'm not doing something unethical?
I think for us, at least at SJSU, there's really specific policies about that, and I imagine that there are at every organization. If you don't have one, maybe bring it up because you want to make sure how much it is, and cite your sources. It's just like any other source. If you're taking anything, you can be, if you found it on YouTube, you still have to say where you got it. So if you got something from ChatGPT, just make sure that you cite that.
Okay, thank you. And Ramses.
Yeah, and I think this has to do with citing, and also part of what you're bringing up is we don't know, right? When you go to these large language models, what is plagiarism in this context is actually a legal and ethical area of study and development, right? And so I do think I like what Lisa says is make sure you know your organization's citation rules. And sometimes those rules are just this was generated by AI. That kind of passes the buck a little bit, but it's also a lot of times the case. But again, if what you're getting out of generative AI is referencing something, never don't check it. Always check it, because I have had so many references just point to things that don't exist, or reference things that when you go look at it and its interpretation of that reference is just wild, right? And so you really need to make sure that when there's references involved, that you're one, making sure that those references are correct, but two, that you're following whatever your institution's rules are of citation, all the way through. Again, AI is not actually doing thinking; it's merely doing pattern recognition and regurgitation, and that can get you in a lot of trouble.
Don't be like the lawyer. Don't be
Yeah,
Stephen
yeah,
Schwartz.
yeah.
He would want you to remember the hallucinations. Yeah.
Yes. So another question that's come in, and I don't know if the two of you have, are there specific tools that you find more helpful than others? Or do you have any advice on somebody who's surveying the landscape? Like, how do they choose which one to maybe use?
So I in one of the in my slide with the resources, there's a comparison chart. I think it's from
Mhm.
Purdue, and it can give you what the things can do and what they can't do and what it's more recommended. So that was useful. And the other thing is just try and see what works for what you're doing and see for a while. And that's probably what I.
Yeah, I'll add just a little bit to that is everything moves every week on every single one of these tools. And so for us to give you a recommendation right now will be invalid as soon as we stop talking. And so it really is like Lisa said, go play around. I in my original version of these slides, I tried to use at least three different tools. We kind of came up with some better examples of my work, and ended up with ChatGPT as the central piece there. But I use Gemini, that notebook LLM. I haven't played with Claude yet, but I'd really like to. So I think playing around and kind of getting, because I have noticed certain ChatGPT is better for legalistic or legislative research. It's willing to say things to go check if it's true, but it's willing to say things that Gemini has stopped itself from saying, um, and sometimes that's useful. But I have found Gemini to be a better and the ability to actually generate tone and content that I have to edit less. Again, editing still required, but I
Mhm.
have found differences. But next week that might be different, and so you just really got to kind of keep playing. This is an emerging field, as we all know.
And Ramses, are any of the examples that you shared with us using tools where the city has paid money to license something, i.e., someone in our audience couldn't just go do the same thing with the free tools that are available?
Everything I've shown, except for that city manager's revision, I believe that requires a true license, because they're building out a model. Though you might be able to get some version of it for free. But other than that, all of these things are can be done for free up to a point, right? They all kind of give you that free tier. You can use it so much and all that kind of stuff. But you can most certainly go learn and play and do some initial things for free. The city of San Jose has committed to giving us as staff tools, and so if we go ask for subscriptions, we do get them. I'm pretty sure the city's paying a pretty penny for the amount of subscriptions we have in the city at this point. But yeah, so there's a lot to be done for free before you commit to any particular thing.
By the way, I noticed it's 1 minute until our official ending. We our speakers have kindly agreed to stay on a bit longer. So for those of you who are interested and can, we'll keep the conversation going for a few minutes. But I want to just sort of officially wrap things up by saying thank you very much to everybody for joining us. There should be a link in the chat or going in momentarily to learn about other MTI events coming up that you might want to join us. And these include a virtual fireside chat with the Caltrain Executive Director, Michelle Bouchard, coming up on April 14th. Again, if you're interested in that online graduate program in transportation management, reach out to me or learn more about us online. And we have some information sessions on that coming up as well. So with that little sort of boilerplate over, let's go back to questions. And some more have come in, but actually one thing I have been wondering, and again, Ramses, is maybe more for you because you're in a sort of using this as part of an organization. How do you, as a manager or just as someone working with peers in an organization, how do you bring along folks who are maybe resistant to even trying these tools?
Yeah, I mean, it can be quite scary for a lot of folks, or and people have legitimate ethical concerns, right, around all of this. So one is acknowledging where people are at, right? You can't just push over people, but I do lean into this as one our at least in our environment, we have a lot of top down direction to get in, right? Figure this out. What is this doing? And I don't know about you, but most of the folks working in public sector have more work to do than they possibly could ever do. And so finding efficiency tools, trying to do that and kind of getting that in there. But also making sure there's a lot of training. Folks need hand holding to get into new tools. Folks need to learn what things are. All the questions that are coming up here, all the questions around this stuff. Everybody has them, right? That everybody is asking, is this okay? You know, giving up on being a useful employee by using this? Am I being ethical? All these things are really valid questions, and folks need to have some exposure to that. So making sure there's training, making sure there's clear policy, but then also, at least in my group, I do a lot of, hey guys, like we need to do this. We don't, we just have so much work to do. But also, and the truth is here, Lisa's statement at one of her slides was, I've actually quoted a lot since I've originally seen it in her slide is AI is not going to take your job, but somebody who knows how to use it is. This really is a huge leap in productivity. And that's really noticeable pretty quickly. So kind of all these things together, creating a supportive environment, talking about why it's so important both at an institutional and a career level. All these things kind of help folks hopefully jump over that barrier.
And Lisa, is there anything you want to add?
It's just another like one of those little anecdote kind of if I was trying to put this in a bite-sized thing to encourage people to use it or not. But I'm a millennial, and when I was a kid, people were like, "You're not going to have a calculator in your pocket all the time. You have to learn how to do all of the things." And you still need to, because I don't, if I don't know the formula for the problem, if I don't know the problem I'm going to solve, the calculator's not going to help me. But if I do, it saves time. And so that is kind of what I think of this as is a tool that you can use that it's here now, and using it is probably going to save you time. So figuring out how to is advantageous for you and for whoever, whatever you're trying to accomplish.
I like the calculator idea. Like, if you imagine the productivity of somebody who refuses to use a calculator compared to,
You
if you
can
have a
do it.
calculator.
You can do it. Yeah, but it's going to take you a lot longer. Yeah.
Right. So actually, there are several good questions have come in, but one that just came in, I think is a bit different and rather interesting. Any advice on how to keep some of the time you save once you're using these AI tools? I feel like expectations just go up.
I'll try to address that one because I mean, on one hand, I would say in my environment at least, we just have more than we could possibly ever do. And each piece of work, has to live up to a certain level of expectations. But I think what you're talking about in this question is the level of expectation of productivity itself goes up because these,
Mhm.
and at that point, I say, is your management being reasonable? Right? Is there some managing up that needs to be done? And also, I think there's a lot of the hype curve is a little bit high on this right now. So while it is a big leap in productivity, and as we're talking about, really is this tool, I think folks really need to do the amount of actual productivity gain is not understood yet, right? We need to still take some time to say, what does it actually mean to implement this? Our memos are going faster. I can say that our writing process made everybody nervous, and everybody had, was pulling their hair out all the way through the process. And that's so common in institutions like this. The whole temperature around that work is cooling down, and the process of getting it through is taking less time. That's really good, right? Okay, but now how does that then translate into the further work stack? I think you just really need to keep saying we don't know yet. We're trying, definitely trying to gain here, but in public institutions is like water; it will find its way to fill every open cavity. So it's not always easy.
I know for myself, I am a tentative AI user for writing. I'm certainly not a power user. And I suspect I spend as much time as I did before. I just end up with a better product. Um, which, yeah, we can decide is that efficiency or not. Lisa, anything you want to add?
I don't know. I have to go chew on that for a while. That's a really good question. And now I'm sitting here reflecting on my own work because some of it is just society will do that,
Mhm.
that's the way that we operate.
Mhm.
But I do think I agree that maybe, you spend time in, but hopefully you get a better product even if you are spending more time on it. I think what you said, Asha,
Mhm.
makes sense.
So, one of the questions we got, and I don't know if either of you want to speak to AI agents. Do you have anything you want to share related to that concept? No. Okay. All right. So then we have, again, it's a very interesting, it's quite a long comment, Colin, that you have put in. So I guess I'll just read the whole thing. The principle of making sure that humans double check all AI products and are ultimately accountable for the outcomes makes sense. My concern is that if the human contribution is limited to checking AI writing, that people will be using a set of expectations or norms that will increasingly center around AI's writing style and norms. That is, we want humans to be the gold standard for expertise that's validating AI products, but we gain that expertise only when we do the writing and the tasks ourselves. Um, so, how does someone who has never written a city memo, only reviewed AI products, gain the expertise needed to effectively provide that needed layer of review? This is an excellent question.
I love this question and I love the thought space that you're going at, Colin, because I really think it's as a manager, I've been doing this for 20 years. Like I'm used to kind of yeah doing the work myself, and now I'm at a level where I'm managing work. So honestly, my job doesn't change that much. I'm used to getting memos written by other people and spending time helping them and coaching them into a better product. So to some degree, your question hits me right in the face in a great way. But I will say, I don't think it's just checking. When you generate something in AI, it's just like getting early research, early drafting from folks. And if all you're doing is checking, meaning some kind of mechanical, oh, is that reference correct, or have I met that, the punctuation guidelines or something like that from my institution. I would agree with kind of I would say the undertone of your question, but I think there's a lot more to it, and you have to, and me as a manager, I have to make sure my folks are doing this. But it is, how do you say, this is thought partnership in a certain way. I know we have to be careful with what we say by thought in this AI context, but I think that there's a lot to be said about the generative AI pieces are literally just patterns being thrown at you. And if you can't translate those patterns into the actual context you're working in, are not doing your job, right? And so really making sure that you're doing more than mechanical checking, that you're actually kind of using this to develop your thought, stuff like that. And I'll just say one more piece there because I know we're almost out of time, which is every technology like this challenges what we've done. Printing press, typewriter, computer, each one of these completely rewrote what it meant to do this task.
Was the pun intended there?
Well, that. Um, right, but we're really we don't know what this is going to go. Our whole society is trying to figure this out, right? And this is in a way the next version of the typewriter. Right? The folks who used to have to do typesetting now have a completely different thing, right? And so, of course, it's a little different because it's thought sort of. But anyways, yeah.
Great, thank you. And Lisa, you can have our last word on this. We'll wrap up in a minute.
Okay, I have two kind of contradictory thoughts on this.
Mhm.
One being I completely agree with Ramses in that it's just perhaps if even if that were the case, which I don't think it should just be checking, but let's say that that's what your role ends up being, where you're not doing the actual writing itself, you're just doing the checking. That's just a different skill, right? Instead of writing by hand, now you learn how to use the typewriter. Instead of, doing the math right out, you're now learning how to use a calculator. It doesn't mean that one's more valuable than the other necessarily. So that's one viewpoint. On the other hand, I remember I taught some AI to some high school students, and he was convinced that he never needed to write anything ever again because AI would do it. And I led him to think about that for a minute. And I said, "How old are you?" And he said, 17. And I said, "Okay. So do you always want to write like a 17-year-old?" And he said, "Well, what do you mean? I'm going to train the AI to do my voice and it won't be, generic because it'll be trained on my information." I said, "Right. The information that you put in now, the skills that you know now, the writing that you can do now." And so I do agree with, I think you said Colin was the one that said that if you don't practice the skill, you won't get better at it. If you don't learn how to write that, you won't. It's just whether you need to. Do we need to? I don't know. It depends on where we're going with this. And like Ramsey says, it's going to change all the time anyway. So
Well, thank you both so much, Lisa and Ramses. This has been a wonderful discussion. I know I'm going away with some things that I'm going to try out soon, perhaps even today. Thank you very much to the guests who stuck with us for this full hour. I also hope that you've taken away some tips that maybe even this afternoon or tomorrow you'll go play around with. You will be getting an email with a link to the recording and the slides. And yeah, I just thank you all again for joining us and hope everybody has a very good rest of the day. Bye.